Hi, I'm author Nancy Flinchbaugh with spiritualseedlings.com. Today I'm interviewing Pastor Adam.B.Banks to talk about race because I think this is so important for us to end racism in our country. I wrote my most recent novel, Revelation in the Roots, Emerald Isle, towards this end. And I'm doing this series as a tribute to my late friend Winky Mitchell, who taught me so much about speaking up and working to stop racism. Pastor Adam Banks is a graduate of Princeton Theological Seminary. He serves as the senior pastor at my church, First Baptist Church, Springfield, where he does an incredible job serving as our spiritual leader, a prophet, and pastor. He's also currently a doctoral student at the Ohio State University, where he is pursuing a PhD in comparative studies. Somehow he manages to do all of this while also being a loving husband to his wife Olivia and a great father to his two little boys, James and Henry. Well, welcome, Pastor Adam Banks. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with me this morning about race. And first, I just want to ask you, why do you think it's important to talk about racism today?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having conversations. Some difficult conversations, but important conversations. I think that it's important for us to talk about race because we can't, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said some giant, and excuse me for not remembering who said it, but we cannot solve all of the problems that we face, but we will solve none of the problems that we don't face. That's my paraphrasing of it. They definitely said it more eloquently. But getting at the idea that without talking about the issues of racism that affects everyone, without talking about it, without being able to deal with it, uh, just in a forthright manner, then it will continue to persist in various ways. We don't live in a post-racial we don't live in a post-racial society, or a society of complete racial democracy. These are myths, and I think that there is a level of progress. There's a level of, things aren't what they used to be, but things are not where they need to be, where they should be. So talking about it, facing it head on, helps us to move in the right direction.
Okay. So I guess this is a really big question, but what do you perceive the problem is right now? Like, what have you personally experienced, and how do you also see that impacting a lot of people of color in our country? That's a huge question. It's like,
I'm so yeah, part of my research mind has been engaged by that question, but I think part of what the issue is just avoiding the conversation, avoiding avoiding having conversation, avoiding being able to directly address the issues. If we look at the prison industrial complex, we see that the the population is incredibly disproportionately Black, uh, um, Black and people of color. If we look at arrests, or we look at folks being pulled over by police officers, law enforcement agents, we see that it is disproportionately Black folks. If we look at environmental concerns, ecological concerns, and creation justice, we see that it is people of color, it is Black people who are disproportionately impacted by by climate change and issues that arise from us not being responsible stewards of creation. So I think with and then so with each and every one of these, with education, with healthcare, like every measure, we see that black people remain disproportionately marginalized, uh, oppressed, above any other group. And so with each of these measures or categories, there are political discourses and agendas around each one that seem to push aside the issues of race that are associated with each measure, but then also preserve preserve ways of life, ways of being, preserve like the status quo in a manner that continues the existential disavowal of people of color. So it's like I don't without talking about without taking these issues seriously and without recognizing race, then I don't see how anything will change. But I think that conversations like this that lead to action, that lead to um, actionable steps such as engaging in local local political action that is able to shift some of the dynamics that provide equitable outcomes that honor those. As a person of faith, I am most concerned about the justice, as I believe God is. God is most concerned about the justice, um, making things right for the least of these, those who have been disproportionately impacted, oppressed by systemic or um, structural orders that continue to negate the suffering of the disinherited.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you're saying at a lot of different levels, in a lot of different areas in our society, we still have a problem. We have a problem with race that disproportionately affects people of color, whether we're talking about police stops, our prison system, our climate change, our environmental pollution. All of those things are impacting people of color in a much more harsh way, which you as a Christian don't believe God wants that, which I agree with you.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. And I do, as you say that, I do want to make it clear that as it disproportionately impacts Black folks and people of color, that it is not as though it does not impact white folks.
right.
Yeah, that everybody, it might be disproportionate at certain times, but a lot of these things catch up to everybody in very obvious ways. But right now, it's in more subtle, maybe subtle ways, especially in the way in which the issues are spoken about and portrayed, as though it's in the interest of white folks to continue to operate at this status quo. But uh, I think that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and brother Malcolm X, I think that they were getting to a point of recognizing that it was poor people of every color. It was a whole bunch of white folks that were poor and building collaborative efforts to bring about justice. Uh, that's the direction that both of them were headed, especially toward the end of their lives. And I think that we're dealing with same issues, different issues, but I think like one of the important points to make is that like it's not just the other that's impacted by these negative issues that we're facing, but everybody is. But everybody needs to get on board with solving the problem, with talking about it, with changing the systems that order our lives in explicit and implicit ways, and uh, yeah, to
Yeah, so I guess one area that needs to be talked about is in the schools. And like you say, there's kind of a movement now to keep it out of the schools. Like they're saying it's going to upset the children, but like you say, children need to know the history. So what would you recommend in the schools? And I know there's a lot of different levels there.
yeah, I feel like you kind of getting at the whole CRT discussion, the critical race theory discussion.
Yeah.
And we see Florida, we see different pockets across the country. Yeah, I want to say like critical race theory is 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 not being taught in elementary schools. It's not being taught in middle schools. It's not being taught in high school. Critical race theory is a theory developed by lawyers, like law schools, that teach the ways that systems that look at court cases and see and analyzes the way that systems um, contribute to or might inform the ways in which the law is applied or not applied in certain situations, the way that justice comes about or does not come about in certain situations, which is influenced by race. So critical race theory deals with that. There's critical gender theory. There's critical abilities. There's critical theory just around culture and sociality, around so many different things. But kindergartners or seniors in high school are not digging through court cases at the detail of lawyers. So I just want to be very clear that critical race theory is not being taught. What people are opposing is history being taught in the school, Black history, or the history of injustice committed toward Black folks, toward immigrant folks, toward different folks of different ethnic backgrounds. All of the when you get to a point in U.S. history, kind of around the turn of say, I guess like 19 like right around 1900 and like through the 20s, maybe you get these hyphenated designations of Americans, immigrants, and like critical race theory kind of looks at that in depth. But the history is looking at is just generally saying this is what Black people went through. This is what Hispanic folks. This is what Latinx folks went through. This is what African immigrants went through. This is what those previously enslaved went through over the course of the development or just progression, the history of this nation. And that is not critical race theory, but history. And I believe that this effort to remove um, the history, understanding the history, understanding how it informs where we are today, so that we are able to move forward, so that our future does not reflect our our past. I'm gonna let that one that our future does not reflect our past. Nothing about again. It's a whole bunch of folks that aren't chasing anything from again, but see liberation, see freedom, see equality, see the pursuit of happiness as being a pursuit that is to come, that we're striving after. Very long-winded answer here. I think that elementary school students should be exposed to age-appropriate history. So what I mean by that is discussing the dynamics of the Haitian Revolution and how the Haitian Revolution was used as a foundation for the French Revolution. Like third graders I don't know if they're able to look at that quite, you know, but looking at Rosa Parks, but also Fannie Lou Hamer in a manner that is understandable, that is appropriate for that level of development. And then that which is appropriate for middle schoolers, that which is appropriate for high schoolers, that in order to understand the reality of where we are today, there has to be exposure to the reality that was endured by folks that came before us, by my parents, by my grandparents, great grandparents, and by so that means by other folks' parents and great grandparents and great grandparents, seeing how things were, seeing how things are, seeing how things should be. That age appropriate exposure to the history, teaching of the history of the wholeness of history is just right. like it's just it's just that which reflects integrity, uh, to not be trying to hide, compartmentalize certain parts of our history. Yeah.
So to teach the history at the level that children can understand so that they have a good background, and also to work towards a future where people do have equal rights and equal opportunity, I guess is what you're saying, which I think when I was growing up, I think they taught us those values and made us believe that that's the American way, that we live in a democracy and that everybody is entitled, to equal rights and equal opportunity. But the reality has not been so, So I think that's where there's still that discrepancies there. And if we don't, what you're saying is, if we don't talk about it, there's no way we can change it. And so if we try to really make our country the great country that I always was taught that it was, things have to change, and we need to be able to talk about that. So I hear what you're saying at the school level. And then also, like, what would you recommend somebody like me do about this? I think sometimes it's overwhelming when I think about the things that need to be changed. And I have tried to do things in my life to work towards change, but I just wonder, what advice would you give to me or to others that maybe want to make a difference today?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So or learn, study. There's 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 so much material that is available for free to learn about like these systemic issues that I've alluded to learn about the battles of like what is included in education and what is not, like learning, like studying. um okay, let me be clear. I don't think this is what you're doing right now. I don't, not saying that, but like what you don't want to do is go ask the black friend like that you have, or go ask somebody like, hey, so like, oh, history's messed up. Tell me about that. Like, and I'm saying I don't get the sense at all that this is not that. This is not that. But what I'm saying is that there's so much available that you don't have to put somebody under pressure, or kind of like marginalize somebody or tokenize somebody in such a manner to say like, hey, teach me about racism. There's so much available to read, to learn. There's so much available that offers solutions, and I'm talking about like articles on the internet, but also like books, so many books written, TED Talks that have been shared, podcasts. There's just so much material for folks to be educated in issues of justice, racial justice that expands beyond that formal category, like creation justice, educational justice, like so many things that do have an impact on race and equality. But I also think so. Like these are things that I know that you are doing, Nancy, So like you are constantly like reading, learning, educating yourself, and then you are somebody that brings people together for conversations, to like, share your ideas, hear ideas from others, continue to sharpen
Yeah,
your political, like your political framework, and then go and exercise it. Like I know that you show up at town halls and city council meeting, like you show up to make it clear, actively participating in the democratic processes that shape our ways of life and interacting with one another. Like, educate, share with one another, be sharpened and sharpen others, and then go and apply and show up and participate in things that do impact, that do have a real impact, and like local level. Like we take for granted the local level sometimes, and get caught up in the hype of national figures. Not like that doesn't matter, but yeah, like
that's where we can have the most impact. It's locally, and I'm doing this series in part to honor my friend Winky Mitchell, who passed away. And I know you knew Winky too. She was involved at all levels, and was very helpful, and probably she was a bit of a crutch, and I do believe, like me as a white person, it's my responsibility to do not really to rely on you to tell me what to do or to show me the way, because it's a white problem, But I'm still trying to figure out. Some of her friends are talking about reading some of the books that Winky liked, and I really liked that idea because that would help us maybe talk together and think, how can we continue Winky's work? Not just to read for the sake of reading, but to read to figure out how we can mobilize. And one of the things I used to do was work with the Peace Center when I was still working, and I was about ready to retire. After Winky passed away, I thought, now I've got to keep speaking up. What Winky would teach at Peace Camp was bystander training, and how each of us need to speak up when we hear things that aren't right, and we know they're not right. We need to speak up, whether we're advocating for an individual or for a group of individuals, where we're challenging a racist joke or a sexist joke, or trying to help out a person. In those situations, what we do makes a big difference. And so I hope I'll continue to respect Rinky in that way. So anyway, you are, sorry, embarking on quite an educational journey right now. Can you tell me a little bit? And I know it's partially is related to your concern about racism in our society. So can you tell me a little bit about your PhD work? And we'll
yeah.
start.
No, it's okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share. I do want to mention real quick Peace Camp, and I mean, yeah, praise God for Winky. I think Peace Camp. I think Freedom School. I think programming like Promise Neighborhood. These different efforts in Springfield, Ohio, do great work. That is, explicitly or implicitly, but definitely have an impact on racial justice. I am grateful. I'm grateful for, and I think that they provide wonderful examples of actionable steps, to have a real impact. Um, my research, so my doctoral research, has to do with bringing critical race theory to bear on the intersection of hip hop consumption in the US and the project of humanism, that is inherent to modernity, or that flows out of the Enlightenment. And so, what I'm talking about is the possibilities for, or limitations placed upon, one's agency or movement toward liberation while consuming hip hop, that is determined by age, class, race, gender, sexual orientation, all of these identity markers, and that which defines the human. So that project of humanism flowing out of the Enlightenment has to do with the definitions of what it is to be human. established by Descartes and Hegel and other major philosophers in Europe. Um, these philosophers that say there needs to be a certain level of self-determination. There needs to be a certain level of establishing what happens in here in the world, having a real impact, that the world reflects everything that is happening in here. So like this intellectual superiority in relation to nature. And with these definitions, Africa is deemed to be not human, less than human, or the lowest category of human. For very few, for the vast majority of these philosophers establishing the definition of human, it was that Africa was not human. And so part of the definition is rooted in what the human is not. So there's an anti-blackness inherent to the human. And so with that, my project, my research has to do with um, does cultural expression, does hip hop consumption and performativity, does that provide a basis for recognition of humanity for folks that are involved in that form of cultural expression? And yeah, deeply inspired by the death of Jordan Davis. May God may God rest his soul.
Yeah, so just the expression of hip hop as an artistic form, which people do to try to express what they're experiencing in the culture. Is that what you're kind of saying? And but it's negated by some people or by somebody who would even kill somebody who's listening to hip hop. So you're trying to establish this is an artistic form that's expressing something very important as and yet it's not being allowed. So there's kind of that tension. So that's what you're working on.
Absolutely. To what extent does it make way for the recognition of humanity? To what extent is hip hop associated with blackness, and therefore is hip hop like a signal of inhumanity or subhumanity? Um, yeah, a lot of big questions. I'm in my first year of studies right now, so a lot more to work to do. But yeah, there are scholars. I'm not the first scholar to explore this, not by any means. And yeah, I have some big people, big influencers who I follow in their tradition of exploring this.
At the end of the Emmys the other night, they had that long 8-minute segment. That was hip hop, right? Would you call that hip hop?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that
Yeah,
was a real cultural expression, didn't you think? It was like a
absolutely. Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. I mean, part of the question is to what extent do hip hop artists or hip hop consumers want to be recognized by this project of humanism? Like, is it an appeal to be recognized by that enlightenment definition of human that endures into contemporary times, or is it an expression of um, ontological validity on its own terms? So yeah, I'm not trying to go on and on.
it gets
But
a lot deeper than that. That's what you're
yeah,
saying. I know the intellectual pursuit is always very deep. So we're just skimming the surface here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But thank you for letting me share.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, and I'll continue working and trying to continue Winky's legacy and appreciate your leadership at our church, calling us to continue to work for justice. My screen went blank all of a sudden. I don't know
Well,
why.
thank you, Nancy. I'm grateful for this series that you're engaging in, inviting different speakers to share, but keeping the good work of conversation, of exchange, happening. Thank you so much for this work. God bless you. Continue to do this good work.
Okay, I will. And thank you so much for your leadership and your work and your intellect among us. So blessings on you on your day.
Thank you.
Great to talk to you.
Thank you, Nancy.
I would encourage you to listen to Pastor Adam Banks' wonderful sermons on his YouTube channel at Adam.B.Banks, where you can hear our First Baptist Church weekly worship services. You can also visit our church online at firstbaptistspringfield.org or come in person at 638 South Fountain, Springfield, Ohio. Worship is weekly at 10 a.m. I also encourage you to read my book. Author Alice Benson has said about it, at a time when our country is ever more divided, this book seeks to help us find ways to reconcile and come together. It is an exploration of the healing power of spirituality and faith. Mariana Robinson said that she enjoyed reading the book and its idea that people can listen for similarities rather than differences. She finds it a visionary dream that she hopes will actually come true someday. And so do I. I so hope that we can address racism effectively in our country. Will you join me in talking about race? Email me at nancy.flinchbaugh@gmail.com if you would like me to interview you. This has been a Spiritual Seedlings Interview with Nancy Flinchbaugh. Check out my websites at nancyflinchbaugh.com and spiritualseedlings.com, and follow my YouTube channel for more interviews. And I hope you'll check out my latest book, Revelation in the Roots, Emerald Isle, and see what I have to say through my characters in working together to solve our problems of both race and politics in the United States. It's a novel, it's an adventure, it's a trip to Ireland. Check it out.